Vincent and Gary. They are both outstanding business professionals in their own industry. Gary is the partner at Gadens Lawyers, a high-level law professional firm, and Vincent is the partner for ShineWing Australia, which is a accounting firm, I would say, accounting firm, yes, with a clear focus on Chinese businesses. So today we're going to discuss the topics around financial and legal challenges businesses often face during their growth phase. And because they are very experienced in what they do, we just thought that they're the perfect candidate for giving advice to many of the entrepreneurs coming to our events. Thank you so much for taking your time to come to our events today. Vincent,
it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll have to just share one. Because when we think about the companies that both you work in, 111 Eagle Street and also 71 Eagle Street, we kind of think those are really highly respected jobs that people do at top tier professional firms. But is that actually as glorious as we thought? Can you describe to us what a typical work day of yours look like?
Well, apart from the higher rent we pay on Eagle Street, a typical day, I think by 9 o'clock I'll be having my second cup of coffee. The first cup is at home. My day is typically, during work hours, is typically filled with a lot of client meetings, internal meetings, our staff trying to catch up with me to review their work and sign off the work. Lunch is usually very short on my desk, whatever I can find downstairs or whatever I brought to work. And usually by 1 o'clock is my third cup of coffee. I actually don't get time to do my own work uninterrupted, probably about until 5 o'clock. So I think 5 o'clock is probably the time where I actually will be able to focus on my work with hardly any interruptions. And I find personally I work best from 5 till about 7 or 8 o'clock. It's probably the best productivity I can get out of the day. Fortunately, during the day, there's a lot of interruptions. The phone rings a lot of emails, there's a lot of distractions.
Do you work on weekends too?
I try not to. I try to spend as much time as I can with my family. But unfortunately, sometimes with client demands, it's the nature of a job that you would have to do a bit of work on the weekend to get the work done, or more so give you a more relaxing Monday morning. Otherwise, Monday is very stressful when you get back to work. So.
What about you, Vincent?
So my schedule is not dissimilar to Gary's. So normally I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I leave home about 6:30 after having the breakfast at home. So I'll be work around 7. Start working from 7 to 9 before I start attending the clients' meetings. Normally I have 5 to 10 meetings a day. I never have really lunch at my desk, so it's either with a client or with a contact. So normally I have dinner booked as well, sometimes double booked. So the first half I go one dinner, the other half go to the other dinner. So normally I get home about 9 to 9:30, sometimes a bit later. I guess we all enjoy what we do, otherwise it's a very long day. On the weekends, I try only work half to 1 day on the weekend, so leave just 1 day for recovery, also with the family. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, well, not two different entrepreneurs. Right, how long have you both been partnered at the firms that you work in?
So I've been a partner for about, so I joined ShineWing 8 weeks ago. As a partner, so it was 2 months at ShineWing, but 18 months before that I was with another firm. So I was there about 19 months as a partner, but I joined as a graduate, so I worked 9 years before I was made a partner.
What about you, Gary?
I was made a partner in 2011 at Gadens since that time, And I think I started at Gadens as a solicitor, so not so dissimilar as a graduate, I guess. So,
Great. So, thinking about your early years in Australia, what do you think is the
the series of events that have eventually led you to what you do currently and also achieve, the partner level at a relatively young age?
I think as most Asians in here will probably agree, it's probably your parents pushing you. My parents always wanted me to be a doctor. Obviously, I didn't achieve that goal, so I think lawyer is the second one off the list. Yeah, I think a lot of it's, I guess, it's obviously driven by your parents and what they expect out of you, and it really it's up to you individual then to realise that goal yourself and to push yourself through. It's often a very long journey. These days, I think the younger generation coming through, they always see this as they wanted a shorter way to getting there, and I guess many of the entrepreneurs here tonight will obviously have that view as well. But it is a very long journey, and if I probably had to do it again, I'd probably rethink my career.
Thanks for sharing that.
So I guess I joined, started working as graduate accountant in year 2007. In year 2008, GFC hit, so the company had started making a lot of people redundant. At the time, I was a bit scared, so I put my hands up saying, in Queensland, there's not that many Chinese-speaking accountants in the city, so I want to target the Chinese market. At the time, the tax partner, Jamie, said, that's a good idea, so we came out, formed a new team, so there were only two of us. Thanks to the strong growth of the Chinese investments in Queensland, we were able to grow from 0 fee to about $2 million in 7 to 8 years. So that has become almost a mainstream client base, so which has pushed me into the partnership.
Very impressive. Congratulations. Based on the experience of both of you, would you say that it's unusual for someone of Asian background to make it to the level of partner at a top level professional firm like the two that you're working in?
Well, I think there's certainly a lot more people with Asian background has become senior executives in the companies, in the firms. I was an overseas student, so I came to Australia in year 2000. I went to year 11, year 12, then did uni. So before I started studying at the main school, I had very little English. And I'm sure from a English second language background, everyone understands it is quite difficult in the start to master the language and to be able to learn stuff in English and also speak English with your friends, networking, doing the uni study as well as working. So it is a learning curve. And also, in the same time, you also need to crack the cultural barrier. So naturally, it is difficult, not just because we are Asian, it's also because there's a number of other things we need to overcome. But it's definitely not impossible. As I was quite lucky because apart from the technical knowledge, apart from the commercial sense, there was a strong demand from the client base actually needed someone with the cultural background, the language skills to be able to help. So my Chinese background has become my advantage in a career.
Very good. What do you think, Gary?
I think it is difficult, obviously, to get there. I mean, it's not just because you're of an Asian background. I think generally it's just difficult. But I think, I don't know, I probably agree with Vincent. I think at this day and age, I think we will find there'll be more and more Asian professionals getting to that level, partly because I think, as everyone's well aware, there's a huge influx of investment coming from China, particularly with the language abilities. If you put that together, I think it definitely will provide an advantage, and I will be surprised if I don't see more and more Asian partners coming through the ranks.
That's a great tip, because we have quite a few graduates coming to our events, and I think that's very empowering, because they tend to think that without being born here and speaking English as their native language, they're naturally disadvantaged, but that's not actually the case.
I don't have the fortunate ability of Vincent's Mandarin skills, but I think I'm the reverse. So I learned English first, and now I'm actually trying to learn Mandarin. So I'm actually the reverse, struggling through that way. And so much so, I think I also practice in the kind of Asian investment space at work, and I've actually had to specifically employ staff that could speak the language just to help us through, with particular clients. So there's definitely an advantage, and I keep telling the younger grads out there. It's
Good to hear.
definitely, yeah.
So coming to our topic today, from a legal and financial perspective, what do you think is the biggest mistake businesses are making these days?
I'll go first, got the mic. I think getting good solid advice, whether it be legal or accounting, right up front is probably key. But I do understand, and I hear a few comments already before about, and obviously it's a cost return kind of analysis. But I do honestly believe, this is not a self-serving message, by the way, that if you do get some proper advice at the start, it will save you a lot of hassles down the track. It's a simple analogy. I'm a property lawyer, and obviously I deal with properties. A number of times I see clients approach me where they've bought the property in the wrong entity, or they didn't think about future planning and all those kind of issues, and then having to pay stamp duty again. Those kind of issues could easily be resolved if they had proper advice straight up. And I think legal and accounting works hand in hand to ensure that the clients do get that proper advice straight up and spend the money up front to just put the mind at ease.
Right.
So the biggest mistake a client could make is not using Gary as a lawyer and using Vincent as accountant. So my focus has always been inbound investments. I see a lot of business people, especially successful business people, come to invest in Australia and Queensland. Without a thorough understanding of the local markets, people quite often make mistakes. So I always say to people, there's two things they always need to be aware in Queensland and Australia is the volume compared to Asian markets or Chinese market. It could be dramatically different, because if you were operating your own business in China, the volume, the sales you get, the coverage you get will be much bigger than what you could achieve in Australia or in Queensland. The second is labor cost. The labor cost, we had a high-tech company from China, the PhDs, researchers, the salaries level in China was actually a lot higher than the people here in Queensland in Australia. But the low end, where your clerks or your graduates, the pay is a lot higher in Australia. So unless you understand the costing model, it's very easy to make mistakes.
Right. So Vincent, could you share with us a typical example of a business you helped to overcome their financial challenge? You don't have to disclose the client's name or any statistics.
That's a very good question, also very interesting question, because you often hear people asking you about they are short of cash, they have financial challenges. So how do you understand the client's question, I guess is very important. So what do they mean by they need cash? If they thoroughly, genuinely actually need cash, it's probably a problem can never be overcome because everyone needs cash. But if you try to understand it in a way, if they are saying we need a seed capital to be able to grow this business to a certain stage before it becomes self-sufficient, you can actually tell the need is not in the cash itself. So it's quite often that people describe the problem as they need cash, but there's a lot more behind it. So I guess one of the key things that we do when we do consulting work is to try to understand what the clients mean by they need cash. If they just need money, sorry, I can't help because I'm not bank. I'm sure there's plenty of other financial advisors there can do it, but we try to explore the logic behind it. It could be a startup company, could be a great idea, they need a seed capital. It could be a company that the profit model or the margin is wrong. We could we have helped a physiotherapist, his franchise business actually identify the markup was wrong. So they had shops in Brisbane, they had shops in Melbourne, they had shops in Sydney. So basically, if the client booked longer hours to do physio, the business does not make any money. So the costing model they did, or the markup they did, was actually encouraging the customer to book shorter time, which was wrong. So that's The problem wasn't really in the sale. The problem wasn't really in the money itself. It was just the wrong structure. So we try to identify the problem behind they have a financial problem, not so much on the money itself.
Thanks for sharing that. We know that ShineWing has a very clear China focus. So exactly what's the scope of services we provide to Australian businesses in relationship to China?
So ShineWing Australia was the old Moore Stevens Melbourne and the whole Chadwick Melbourne 3 years ago. A lot of people think the ShineWing Australia is a Chinese firm. It's actually out of the 35 partners in Australia, I'm the first Chinese national partner. So it's still an Aussie firm. The current business brought in by Chinese investments is less than 10%. It's actually less than 5% last year. So the strategy of the firm is to be able to grow that into 50% in the next 10 to 15 years. So with the wider network from the ShineWing Asia Pacific, ShineWing International, ShineWing China. ShineWing is a brand, it's the biggest Chinese firm in China, now expanding to countries like Australia, Indonesia, Ireland, UK, Japan, Taiwan, so all countries or areas. The network is quite big. I would say the referrals I received in the last 8 weeks was more than I received in the last 2 years from my old firm. So it is a very good network. So I'm quite confident that we could grow that to achieve what we wanted to achieve. The most important thing is we are promoting a China concept. So not targeting just Chinese clients. So we are promoting a China concept. What we mean by that is, if it's just Australian business wanting to do our China procurements, so that falls into the category of our China concepts. So if you are a Chinese client wants to come to invest in Australia, yes, we can do it. If it's a Australian firm looking for a Chinese investor, then you want to find out where you start, or you want to sell your business to a Chinese buyer, how do you get your business sales ready or sales to Chinese ready, we can do it. So it's a very wide concept as a China concept rather than just specifically targeting a Chinese client.
Thank you. Gary, could you also please share an example of a business that you've helped to overcome their legal challenge, a typical one?
I think generally where we help a lot of businesses, being property related as well maybe, is our ability to get the work done in relatively short time frames. A lot of our clients come to us with deals that need to be done quite urgently because there's buyers that are going to walk or sellers that don't want to sell. So a lot of things we do is time pressured. And I think we've got the resources to be able to turn around the work as quick as we can, hence the longer hours and weekend works, partly because the client needs a deal to be done. I think that's a general comment. As a specific comment, I think where we really help particularly businesses is where we take over maybe midway through, maybe because the client foresees this particular job's probably a bit more difficult than what the normal consultants could handle. And that's when we find ourselves involved partway through a deal, or we get introduced to a deal, partly because the deal is more unique, more specialised. Where we can help is, I'll give you a good example. Recently we had a property for sale of the commercial building in Fortitude Valley, St Paul's Terrace actually. The structuring of it all was done perhaps not ideally in trying to sell the building. We thought it was just a simple sale process, but when we got involved, we did a little digging. We realised that car parking was there, but there was no legal rights to get to the car park, and we had to then fix all these issues and try in order that we can sell the building. And of course, we had a buyer and tow ready to bite. So again, time pressures, trying to fix up issues like the car parking and presenting the property for sale. It's often quite a challenging task. But I guess that's the benefits that the clients get from us is we'll be able to fix those problems. Not all problems are always fixable, but where we can, we will try to do as quick as we can and try to get the deal done.
Absolutely. So you're dealing with Chinese companies as clients as well, do you? What do you see as a key services?
I like to say they're all the same. I mean, at the end of the day, when the clients, when we deal with clients, I think we obviously want to get the best result for the clients, and I think the clients expect that too. So in that respect, I think it's the same. I guess, and I don't want to be too crass with this comment, I guess the difference, I guess, is how the Chinese perceive the legal fees and how it works. I do believe in China, I think the things are legally a lot more simpler. I could be wrong, but I think a contract's rather short and simple, whereas our contracts here are very thick and very voluminous. And so I think the issue they've got is really fees and how we explain that. So, but it's not because they don't want to pay it, it's more how you explain why it costs so much. So I've now learned after many years now to break down your fees, to explain to them why it costs, instead of saying it costs 100 grand and which you never see them again, you break it down to different stages of the job and you explain, well, this part will cost this much, this part is this much. If you don't want us to do this, we can take this part out. It's more explaining to the client the options, and they pick what they want, and that determines your scope of what you have to do for them. I think it's a much better outcome than saying, you know, it's 50 grand and that's it. They won't come back to you. Yeah, so it's all about explaining, and I think being very transparent on the fees. And generally, I think Asian clients, Chinese clients particularly, I think they like fixed fee because I think they like the fees to be known up front. They don't seem to work well with 6-minute time blocks, which the legal industry, I think the accounting industry too, has been doing that for years to come. So I think there is a shift definitely with the legal industry now to move away from the 6-minute time blocks to more. For those who don't know, this is one people don't want to call me because they think, well, it's 6 minutes, is going to charge me 6 minutes of $650 an hour. I don't want to call him. So practically now how we do this is clients, and not just Asian clients, most clients these days want a fee proposal with either a range or a fixed fee arrangement, particularly the transactional work that I do. And so people want transparency straight up, that you're not going to sit there and think about an issue more than what's necessary. So we're moving away from the time costing model, which is we record our time based on 6-minute intervals, to now more holistic approach. So this job will cost X amount of dollars as opposed to we'll just charge you by 6-minute blocks. So I think clients are pretty switched on, not just the Chinese clients, all clients are now moving towards that direction.
Great. Is there any questions from the floor before we move on? Yes.
Just with your legal practice, do you require a big deposit before you get out of bed?
That's a very good question. You got to be careful with that because, you know, I think it's a bit insulting sometimes when you get a new client in and you go, first thing you say to them is, I'm not going to do any work until you put money in our trust account. I think you really have to analyse the risks and what the potential of this potential client might be. And the problem with Chinese clients is, I think, not a problem, it's a good thing. You never judge a book by its cover. So you don't just meet someone, oh, this is just a conveyance of a house. Because that conveyance of a house, typically the next job you're going to get is probably a conveyance of a commercial building in Eagle Street. So you've got to be, I guess, a bit mindful of who they are, and it is a sensitive issue. I think you just got to, obviously if the job's a 50 grand job, you probably would want some money in trust. But if it's a small job at the beginning, I'll probably take the punt and say, well, okay, I'm prepared to go, just from a relationship perspective.
Because I think lawyers are the only ones that insist on that big deposit. In professional services.
I think it's, as I said, I think it's a changing environment. It's like the 6-minute time lock. I mean, it'd be nice to know you got something in there, you know, to cover some of your costs. Because one of the other challenges I didn't say before, but my day is also chasing debtors. And do I hate doing that? And we do have pressures to try to get that as low as possible, as I'm sure all business owners out there know as well. One of the challenges is getting your debtors paid. As in a law firm, it's no different. I mean, the responsibility comes back to the partner, and you're responsible for your own files, and you chase your own debtors.
To be fair, I do a lot of my normal work. I'm doing social enterprise startup. If I do anything in, say, Kazakhstan or something like that, or any country overseas, it's money up front, because you can't chase money in another jurisdiction.
I think it's a good idea.
That's actually leads to my next question, because we've seen a trend that more and more top-tier professional companies start to support early-stage companies and startups. Because generally, we would think that you guys only serve high-profile clients. So why do you think the professional companies start to give more attention to startups and early-stage companies?
I think, I mean, I think from the point of view that, you know, it's always very self-gratifying to see a client grow from the startup all the way through. I think that's a really good way of building a relationship with a client, and I've always adopted that view that it doesn't matter how big or small you are, I've always treated everyone the same client-wise, because I think that's a really good way of building that relationship, helping a client through from the early phases, being more reasonable in your billings and your 6-minute time blocks. And I always, when I can see as a genuine client trying to get the business going, I try to be more realistic in terms of what we bill them or try to charge them, and try to suggest more alternatives to lower your legal costs, just to help them along. Because I think the eventuality is if it does make it, I mean, you've got a goal, your client there for life. And I think generally most clients will appreciate that, and they're usually very loyal. And that's a client you've just secured for the rest of your practice. So that's probably why a lot of firms focus on that startup space as well. It's a balance from what they do.
I think PwC, Video, they all have their like startup programs to help early stage companies.
I think I agree with Gary. The best client you can have is you pick them up when they're small, and then you grow with your clients. And with the introduction of technology, I think nowadays there's a lot of more startup companies actually grow faster if you compare to 50, 60 years ago. The Alibaba, say, back in 1999, no one knows what Alibaba was. Now it's probably Jack Ma is one of the richest guys in the world. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, 1999, no one knows what Facebook was. Now he's one of the richest guys in the world. So compared to your traditional mining resources, property developments, wealth, so the startup companies nowadays grow much faster as well. So that's why I think a lot of professional firms are looking for the opportunities there.
Yeah, definitely, very clever. Any other questions? Okay, so Vincent, unlike Gary, who specializes in property mostly, and you work for clients across a wide range of industries, and how much do you have to know the industry in order to provide a satisfactory service to them?
Yep. So why I think what makes a good accountant, I see 3 things. One is the commercial sense, second is technical skills, third is the management of time. So I try to put that in the sense of cooking. So if I'm cooking for you, one is I need to know what you like to eat. Second, I have to be good at cooking. And third, I need to deliver that on time. It's not indifferent. I could be I could know.
Who washes up though?
Sorry.
Who washes up the dishes?
Dishes. Dishwasher. So I've seen people with great commercial sense, great technical skills, but cannot deliver the work on time fail. I've seen people with great technical skills, but cannot understand clients from their perspective, so the commercial sense fails. I've also seen people with great deliver things on time, have the commercial sense also lacking in technical skills. So all 3 are important. Quite often people see the technical skill is the number 1. It's important, but it's not the only criteria.
And Gary, so we've seen very dramatic lawyer-client relationships from the US TV shows like Suits or Boston Legal. So in reality, how is the relationship actually like? Like, what is your approach?
Depends whether you put money in trust first. That pretty much dictates how your relationship is going to go, I think. No.
More in the truth.
I think every partner is different in how they deal with their client relationships. So I can obviously talk about myself personally. I think I try to be as open as I can and honest as I can with a client, because the clients don't usually like taking no or bad news particularly well. So whilst you know the answer is no, you probably need to take some time to explain the no. Some lawyers, I think, just say no, and then the client just has a bad impression. Oh, he's a terrible lawyer. But that's probably the correct answer. But it's more about how you sell the no, and building. Once you get the trust to a certain level, you can say no straight up, and that'd be fine. You have a joke about it, or probably have a beer later. But the issue is how do you get to that point? So it's really how to to break bad news, I guess, to tell a client, no, you actually can't legally do that, but say it in a way that doesn't create a negative kind of view about it. So there's many ways of doing it, but I honestly think that this is an art to do that. Hence, I think it does take a while to get to the position in your career, I guess, where you can explain it in a way that it sells a better story than saying no.
Yeah, that's a good idea. This is a question for both of you. Based on your experience, what is the number one thing that's preventing businesses from achieving fast growth these days?
Well, there's always more successful business than less successful businesses. If you look at the restaurants, it's always there's 2 or 3 actually people line up. The rest just there's always empty seats there. So I guess instead of thinking what makes us less successful, maybe it's easier to learn the success. So there's a lot of the businesses successful I find is the market makes the judgment. So if they find the right taste of the market, the services they provide actually gets the appetite from the markets, then they are successful. And once the sales is there, nothing is a problem. So you've got money coming in, so things can be sorted over time. That buys your time, so the sales will buy you everything. But then if the sales is not up there, so everything becomes a problem. So this is my personal view, is if you get your sales, you almost got your 70% of the problem solved. And the sales come from the market, and what does the market like makes the final judgment.
Fortunately, I only can be very specific in this topic, I guess, limited to property. As most people know, I guess in property, the timing is very important in property, and when you buy, when you sell, and it's no different when you're a developer, for example. So I think where I see businesses take off really well is either they're lucky because they picked the right cycle, or they've done it before and they've seen the cycles, or they've worked in a company and gained the experience and then decided to start their own company by learning what they've learned from the previous employer, for example. So from a property perspective, I think having that knowledge of the timing cycles, it really sets apart between whether your company's going to do really well or whether it might not be around in a couple more years. So it's all about timing, and that's the property game.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Because I never believed in luck. I think those who actually achieve success have probably done a lot of hard work in research and finding that cycle that you mentioned, and then they just ride the wave really. Yeah. Thank you for that. This is a question for both of you. Coming from an employee of the company and eventually become a partner, like what has changed? Do you feel more responsibility, or like in general, how do you deal with colleagues who used to work with you as just a co-worker, but now you're actually a partner of the company? The mentality and everything. What would be the biggest difference that you've noticed so far?
I think firstly people expect it, suddenly know the answers to everything, which is obviously not correct. There is a high expectation now on yourself being responsible for a lot of decisions, a lot of the things that go out the door, be a letter of advice or anything that's sent out with your name on it now. You do bear that responsibility that you're responsible for that advice. You may not have personally done it, someone else could have done it, but obviously it's up to you to check it and make sure it's up to what you're prepared to send out. And often that's probably the biggest challenge is that accountability. It sits with you, you're answerable to your other partners, and there's a whole bunch of other management issues that come with it. I think ultimately there is a big step up. We go through a practice management course before we can become partners just to learn about stuff, but none of that ever prepares you to what you're going to face.
Do you feel the same, Vincent?
Yeah, yes, definitely. I guess with the KPIs, when you're an employee, the KPIs is different. It's all about yourself, what you can achieve, you are going to achieve. So when you become a manager, you manage a couple of people, then your little team is the KPI, where KPI captures. Now, if you are leading a team as a partner, then the team performance becomes your KPI. And you're working with other partners, then the firm's performance becomes the KPI as well. So there's two things that I think are quite challenging is you have to be always thinking the laziness. What I mean that is, if I get up in the morning, so I used to think, oh, you know, I'm already late, so what, you know, I worked till 10 last night, but now I have to think, also try to tell my managers as well, so we are leading an example. So if I'm in the company at 10 o'clock every morning, the other people will follow me. So if I'm in the company, say 7 o'clock in the morning, apart from starting early, I'm also sending a message out that we need to be working hard. So it's actually setting the example. So not being lazy myself, also make sure other people are not lazy as well. So that's actually quite challenging. The other thing is the selfishness. So when we, I think it's part of the human nature. So at times you become selfish. You think, oh, this is what's really this is mine, or that's mine. It's not my fault. It's actually someone else's fault. You try to set example. It's a teamwork. So, for example, if say we need to change seats, we need to think, you know, it's not because someone wants a better view. It's actually because we want a same team sitting in the same area, or we try to get some job done. So we need someone to stay a bit later because only that person has certain experience to do that job. You try to think from the team's perspective, not just a partner, not just the manager. So everyone needs to think from the team perspective. I think that that's quite important. So apart from what I can achieve myself, I need to encourage the team to go where we want to go. I think that's a challenge.
That's very true. Do we have any questions from the floor before I ask my last one?
Yeah, hi. Could you speak to the benefits and shortfalls of like legal plans? Because I see a lot of advertisements for legal plans.
So, sorry, what do you mean by legal plans?
Advertising for legal plans, like you pay $50, $100 a month, and you have unlimited legal.
Like a subscription thing,
Yeah.
one fee for a whole month.
Yeah, okay.
Could you speak to the benefits and like shortfalls of that? Because I see a lot of that happening, especially in the United States.
Actually, a client did ask me about that, whether we have that, but it wasn't $50, it was more than that. And I know of big organisations that actually have legal arrangements with law firms on that kind of plan, where it's X amount of dollars for a year, and you provide them all these services throughout the whole year.
Right, you can call up a lawyer if you have a question.
Yeah. I think I could answer your question pretty simply. I think if you're paying someone $50 for a month to do something, it really depends on how much you use that person for. Now, if that person perceives that you're kind of abusing that relationship where you're calling for everything, I think what's going to be happening is the quality of your legal service is going to drop. And you got to question yourself, well, am I going to get value of what I just got? Because I think the temptation of a lawyer is if you're only getting paid so much per month, that's your fee. Certain months you might be doing all right, certain months you might not be doing all right. So I think the problem is then what's going to happen is they're going to delegate that work to the most junior person in the team who's the lowest charge out rate and try to make some dollars out of it. I don't think that services the client as much as they should. But it's obviously a model that really depends on what your needs are legally. I think it's definitely more cons and pros in that one, I think, in my view.
I'm just really impressed by both of you guys listening, Gary, how long you work every day and saying that you don't have 2 days for a weekend. You mentioned a lot about spending time with family and your spare time. What do you do for yourselves to recharge all those batteries and just to make sure you stay sane and you have that balance for yourselves? It
helps a little bit. I don't know. I don't mind a glass of wine. I think that helps. I think as a balance, though, it depends how much work you got to do that night. So I try not to drink now till the weekend. So plus my doctor told me that. I like playing golf. I like listening to music, and I think those things does distract you from the work. Otherwise, you do find yourself. The problem with mobile phones these days is you see everyone on the lift just looking at it. If you're not actually doing work, you're promoting yourself on social media. I'm guilty of that. There's so much distractions in life these days, and so you really do have to find something that you really like. Fortunately, though, balancing that with family time too, so it gets lesser and lesser. It's a personal thing to work out. I think it's very important though.
I do go to the massage quite a bit. So every Sunday I go to this shop at Garden City. So 2 hours, and including massage, acupuncture, and cupping. No, I get headache sometimes because of maybe lack of sleep or something. So that actually helps quite a bit. And also I do half an hour of meditation every morning. That's why from I get up to I leave home, it's 1.5 hour. So apart from 20 minutes of breakfast, then I spend about half an hour doing meditation. I find that's quite a good recharging activities.
Vincent, I heard you read books of Buddhism and philosophy and all that.
Yeah.
Do they actually help you with your business?
It does. I think it's when I have time. So on last Saturday I went to a Buddhism lecture. It's same as today. So there was photography there. So I saw the photo today. I was asleep. So that's really embarrassing. No, I really wanted to be there, but I don't know why I fall asleep. I guess it changes the way we see things. It does help me quite a lot. It's not really helping me getting more clients or helping me work harder. It doesn't work that way. It actually changes the way I see things. So if, say, I upset someone or someone gets really angry, so I'm probably more calm actually receiving that things, and I can think probably more clearly what should I do. Probably avoiding more selfishness, more laziness. So it's from the mindset. I think it does give me a lot of energy.
Yes.
What do you do for vitality?
Do for?
Vitality. Like nutrition, like
Nutrition.
food, and also do you do workout, like exercising?
I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for about 5 years now. I find if after I became vegetarian, I've put on more weight for some reason.
That's probably because you give up on exercise because you're thinking you're eating healthy.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true too. So I do take a bit of multivitamins, so spirulina and superlactins every day, but I don't know whether it helps. So one of my clients used to sell them, so that's why I ate them. It's more of a routine. So I get up at 5 o'clock every morning, just get used to it. So when you're on a vegetarian diet, I find that I've got more energy for some reason. I don't need to sleep as much. That's actually quite true. I don't know why, but it's just feel better.
What about you, Gary?
Try to drink less. I try to run home. At least Monday to Wednesday, I think it's the days where I try to run home, which is always difficult because again, if you're finishing work at 8 o'clock, I live in Toowong, so it's probably not that far, so it takes about 50 odd minutes to run home. So you're looking at about 9 o'clock arrival time at home. My son will be well and truly in bed. So there's a bit of I'm torn sometimes as to, should I go home or should I run home? But I do feel a lot better with runs. I'm trying to do more morning runs. I'm trying to do the early starts as Vincent does. So I do find that the days that I actually do run, immediately more refreshed. Strangely enough, you think you feel more tired, but actually you do feel more refreshed. And your mind is a lot better.
Does anyone have like an actual legal question to ask Gary today?
There's a 6-minute time block on this one.
He can definitely answer more than 6 minutes just for today. Yes.
Yeah, see, let me give you an example. When Google started and Sergio and Larry needed legal advice, they went to a lawyer and they told him up front, we've got a startup company, but we got no money. So the lawyer came on board and he's like, he's the head legal counsel. And do you get situations like that? And how would you handle that? Because a lot of startups just don't have $650 an hour.
I think that's in the legal profession in Australia, in Queensland really, we don't have the flexibility that the American lawyers do in terms of how they get rewarded and remunerated. I think the example you gave there I mean, if I had my pure business mind on with no legal restrictions, I'll probably say, yeah, if the startup had a good pitch, why wouldn't you be the legal counsel with a percentage of shares in the company, for example? We can't do that legally as lawyers, but otherwise I would, because if you genuinely see a good. But what I do, as I said earlier before, is if I generally see this client's potential and really want to help the client out, I would obviously come to a legal fee that suits their needs, and whether it be a deferred payment or something or a small fee up front. There are ways you can structure it so it still works, and maybe when it does take off, then that's when you get your fees at the tail end of it all. So there's another reason why we don't spend all our practice on startups, because it's good to have a focus on it, and we do as a firm have it's not me, but we have guys in our corporate team that regularly turns up to startup hubs just like this to meet with startups and discuss it pro bono, because there's ability to pick up that generator kind of work.
Great. We have 8 to 9 as business networking, so if you have more questions, feel free to ask Vincent and Gary. My last question for today is, if you can summarize into 1 or 2 sentences, what would be your #1 advice for business owners? Okay, last time when we were interviewing George and Robin, they both had like 2 paragraphs. So think carefully before you summarize it into 1 or 2 sentences.
Look for Gary.
Funny enough, I actually say the opposite, because when I always have clients come and see me first, the first thing I always say to them is, who's your accountant, or have you spoken to an accountant? Because I think that probably is more important than legal issues, because having the right structure, no matter what you do, whether it be a property related deal or whatever business you do, if you don't have the right structure up front, and by structure I mean the right company set up, the right trusts, work out how it works from a taxation point of view. I know nothing about taxation, but I do know the basics. You do need to get the right structure up and running. And then you come and talk to me, because then we can then help you use that structure that's already been set up to do what you want to do with it, and whether that be entering a contract or anything you want to do with that particular structure. So if you don't have the right structure right up front, you're going to have some serious taxation issues or income issues that you probably won't get the full benefits of. More so for overseas investors, because I think it's even trickier than how you get your structure then. Once you get that right, I think legally, it's a lot easier for me then to guide you through what you need to do legally.
So finding the right market, finding the right product, and finding the right advisor.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. And,
Thank you.
Thank you.